I want to have a conversation with you this morning about healing. It's always tricky to talk about the healing stories of Jesus. Why? Because in our view, some people get healed and some don't. In our story, it says, in Mark's way of being dramatic, the whole city came out. All of them. And many were healed. Not all, but many. You know, I had a very complicated relationship with healing when I worked in the 90s in the Castro during the height of the AIDS years. We would have a 7 o'clock p.m. service that would be packed. And there would be so many people there that weren't going to be healed. And we'd come across these stories, and I would struggle what to do with those stories. Because there wasn't many that were healed, it was only few that were healed. And when we would offer healing prayer, like we will later today here, it is no exaggeration to say that the line would be out the door, people asking for healing prayer. So I guess that I began to kind of have my idea of what healing is refined during those years. And I began to see healing mainly as wholeness, not necessarily curing. Wholeness. Now, the opposite of wholeness is not necessarily brokenness. Wholeness may mean just living life fully and completely. If you want to be more whole, it doesn't mean you need to be fixed. Maybe you just long to be more complete, more you, more connected, more alive. So healing may not have anything to do, sometimes, with curing. In fact, some people that I have spent time with who are on hospice or who have an incurable illness, some of them are the most whole people I have ever met. Are you with me? Healing of body and healing of soul. Jesus healed many. And they brought to him those who had demons. Now, demons are not talked about much in a progressive church. And don't worry, we're not offering exorcisms today. Jorge might, but I'm not. In fact, we don't talk about demons in our scientific worldview either, do we? But let's not distance ourselves from the notions of demons too quickly, because I want to suggest that they may have something important to reveal to us. We probably think of demons as satanic minions, right? These malevolent spiritual entities. And of course, in the non-scientific worldview of the first century, this is how people would attribute or explain things that they couldn't understand, things outside of their control. In fact, while we might not use the same language today, there are certain things that are inexplicable about people's behavior that we have said, man, it's almost as if they're possessed. Am I right? And just look at all the shows, the movies, the literature that deal with this archetype of a bad or evil spirit. In fact, I want to suggest that we think about these spirits, even though we don't talk about them, we still have them very much in our psyches. Think about what you do. What's this? You say something and you do this. Right? You knock on wood. I do that. I don't even know what it means. I looked it up. You know what it means? It comes from German folklore, and it means that, supernatural beings were thought to live in trees at that time. And so you knocked on the trees for protection from these protective spirits. What else do we do? Well, I hope this happens. Fingers crossed. Right? You know where that comes from? It's a sign of luck, right? Well, there are many origins of this, they say, but really it predated any Christian notions of a cross. Pagan thought the cross was a symbol of unity, the coming together of the worlds. And where that cross met were benign spirits. I think it started there, could have started later in the Christian tradition as a sign of the cross. It used to be that two people would cross their hands if having a deal. And then I guess that got too laborious, so we just did it ourselves. So we think of these things even though we don't name them in the same way. Because we all know or feel, I think, that there are oftentimes forces that are beyond us, right? Forces that are beyond us, whether you have a dualistic worldview or not, forces that are benevolent, benign, or malevolent. Now, it's interesting in this text that when Jesus encounters the demons, as they called them, he commanded them not to speak. Did you get that? Why? Because they knew him. It's like Jesus and the demons went back a long way. Now, why did he ask them not to speak? Well, for one thing, Jesus never made things about himself. The more you read the Gospels, you will see that, the first three Gospels in particular. Jesus always gave the glory to God, to that force beyond and within him. So he didn't want the demons to speak. Plus, they were very unreliable sources. Think of the current day bots. Demons were like bots, spreading fake news. In other passages, Jesus names the demons. He asks them what is their name, but he rarely allows them to speak. Now, here's the thing about that. When we have something in our life that keeps us from being whole, we need to name it. We need to name it. Shame, we need to name it. But we don't need to give it voice. That's the difference. Don't give it airtime. Don't let it reinforce those negative messages. Name it. And then move away. Now, we could think about demons in the ways that we've just talked about. Or in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, the word for demon was also daemon, D-A-I-M-O-N. Daemons were thought of being lesser gods, guides on this human journey. In fact, in ancient Greek, our daemons were our creative energy and power. In ancient Rome, a daemon was genius. People in ancient Rome didn't think that genius was anything to do with one's own intellect, but genius was an outside source used for artists. That way, if the project went well, it was the daemon. If it went poorly, it was the daemon. So how do we balance all this? Because there are forces. Haven't you had days where you think, wow, have you ever said this? What on earth did I do in a former life to get this? Forces against us. I remember when my daughter was little, she was resisting something, and I said, could you just go with the flow? And she said, well, what if the flow's going in the wrong direction? So we need to balance. And please hear me very carefully right now. We need to balance our demons, our daemons, We need a balance. Because there are some things, real issues, mental health issues that are caused in our life by chemical imbalance, situational things that happen, and those need to be treated. And you should never, ever be afraid to seek help. Never be ashamed. There's no shame in mental illness. The balance is that sometimes in our society we pathologize things that are simply the soul's journey. In fact, it is fertile ground sometimes when we're suffering. It's fertile ground for connection with God, with ourselves, with others. Are you with me? In fact, I think that this balance, this struggle about these forces, about our own soul's journey, are at the heart of spirituality. I've read a book recently called The Holy Longing by Ronald Rolheiser. And he says it this way, and it's one of the best definitions of spirituality that I've ever read, because we all throw around the word spiritual. Well, listen to what he says about it. Spirituality is not something on the fringes, an option for those with a particular bent. None of us has a choice. Everyone has to have a spirituality, and everyone does have one, either a life-giving one or a destructive one. No one has the luxury of choosing here, because all of us are precisely fired into life with a certain madness that comes from the gods, and we have to do something with that. We do not wake up in this world calm and serene, having the luxury to choose to act or not to act. We wake up crying, on fire with desire, with madness, and what we do with this madness is our spirituality. It made me feel not alone in my madness, in my desire, in my longing. Hence, spirituality is not about serenely picking or rationally choosing certain spiritual activities like going to church, although that is a very good thing to do. Praying or meditating, reading spiritual books, or setting off on some explicit spiritual quest. It is far more basic than that. It is far more basic than that. Long before we do anything explicitly religious at all, we have to do something about that fire that burns within us. Spirituality is more about whether or not we can sleep at night than whether or not we go to church. It is about being integrated or falling apart, about being with community or being lonely, about being in harmony with Mother Earth or being alienated from her. This fire within, this desire, this human longing, that is spirituality. Our desire, our drive for wholeness, that is spirituality. And some things contribute to that drive, and some things take us down a rabbit hole that's not helpful. The text says, it goes on, when they finally find Jesus, everyone is searching for you. And maybe, beloved community, maybe that is not an exaggeration, because maybe everyone is searching. We are all searching for more wholeness in our life, more fullness of life, more capacity to reach our full potential. Am I the only one that feels at the end of a given day or a given week or a given phase in my life, I am just not the person I know I can be? Am I the only one? I am not in touch with my highest self. I am not using my gifts to their fullest. We long for more wholeness. We long to belong, to be seen, to be known, to make a difference, to realize our potential, to be whole, to be well. So, wholeness is a dance. It's a dance between divine grace and human desire. A dance between a gift and a choice. And what we're asked to do is to invite more wholeness into our life. What we're asked to do is to be willing and to be ready, and some days we're just not ready. And that's okay too, because that's where the grace comes in. But if you are ready, if not today, maybe next week, you can invite more wholeness into your life just by the asking. And know that you are not alone. Ask for those beneficent spirits to guide you. And I imagine you might hear the voice of Jesus, or whatever spirit you are close to, in the words of Mary Oliver coming to you. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk 100 miles on your knees in the desert repenting. Simply have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Be in touch with your desire. Know that in the despair, if you have it, you are not alone. And hear this. To be whole, know that you belong, that you have a place in the family of things. I imagine in some way that is what Jesus said to all whom he made whole in a different language, in a different time, but the same message and the same love. May it be so, and amen.